Welcome back, everyone, to a truly compelling story. Today, we're diving into a fascinating period in history, the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where we see an incredible collision of cultures, privilege, and immense societal challenges. Think about it, the very pinnacle of British society meeting the raw, devastating realities of rural China.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? On one side, you have these incredibly gifted, wealthy, and athletic young men from Cambridge who could have had literally any future they desired in the British Empire. And on the other, you have China grappling with poverty, political upheaval, and perhaps its greatest social crisis at the time, the widespread addiction to opium.
And that contrast is where our story really begins, with what became a massive media sensation in 1885, the Cambridge Seven. Imagine the headlines, right? Seven of Britain's most promising young men, literally giving up everything, their careers, their comfort, their social standing, to go to a distant land, the China Inland Mission. It must have been shocking to many.
Absolutely. These weren't just any students. We're talking about men like C.T. Studd, a famous cricketer, Stanley Smith, son of a prominent politician, and Dixon Edward Hosty, a Royal Artillery officer. These were the golden boys of their generation, expected to lead in politics, military, or business. Their decision to become missionaries was completely countercultural for their social class.
It raises such profound questions, doesn't it? What compels individuals to make such radical sacrifices? To trade a life of guaranteed comfort and influence for one of uncertainty, hardship, and let's be honest, often grave danger in a foreign land. Their motives must have been incredibly powerful.
I think it speaks to a deep sense of conviction, a belief that there was something far more important than worldly success. For them, it was a spiritual calling, a desire to serve what they saw as a greater purpose. But it wasn't just about their personal journey, it was also about what they were going into. And the reality in China, especially regarding opium, was truly horrifying.
You're right. The opium crisis was a scar across the face of China. Introduced and aggressively promoted by British traders, primarily the East India Company, it had devastating effects. Millions were addicted, families were torn apart, the economy suffered, and the social fabric was deeply damaged. It was a crisis of monumental proportions, largely ignored by the very powers that benefited from it.
It's a stark reminder of the darker side of colonial history, isn't it? The economic interests of one nation directly leading to the widespread suffering and dependency of another. So, these Cambridge men arrive in China, not just facing cultural differences, but also this overwhelming public health and social catastrophe that their own country, in a way, had helped create.
Exactly. And it wasn't just abstract, they saw it firsthand every day. People losing everything, literally wasting away. Families selling their children just to feed an addiction. This wasn't a problem you could ignore, especially if your mission was to care for the well-being of the people. It demanded a practical, tangible response.
And this is where our narrative takes another fascinating turn. While the Cambridge Seven brought international attention and a fresh wave of energy to the China Inland Mission, the real, ground-level, impactful solutions often came from within China itself, from indigenous leaders. And one of the most remarkable figures in this regard was Pastor C, or C. Sheng Mo.
Pastor C's story is incredible. Here's a man who was initially a highly respected Confucian scholar. He was an intellectual, deeply rooted in traditional Chinese culture and philosophy. To go from that background to becoming a pivotal leader in the nascent Christian church, and notably in combating the opium crisis, shows immense personal transformation and courage.
It's really important to emphasize that C wasn't just a convert. He became a powerful force for change, uniquely positioned because he understood the Chinese context intimately. He wasn't an outsider. He knew the culture, the language, and the deep-seated pain of his people. He had even been an opium addict himself, which gave him an unparalleled empathy and credibility.
That personal experience with addiction, I think, is key to understanding his innovative approach. He wasn't just preaching, he was actively designing solutions. This leads us to the truly remarkable aspect of his work, his opium antidote medicine and the network he built around it.
So, what exactly was this opium antidote? Was it a traditional Chinese remedy? And how did it tie into the mission work? It sounds like a blend of spiritual and practical care, which is incredibly progressive for the time.
It was exactly that. C, with the help of some Western medical knowledge and local herbalists, developed a herbal remedy designed to alleviate the agonizing withdrawal symptoms of opium addiction. It wasn't a magical cure, but it made the detoxification process manageable. What made it truly groundbreaking was how he integrated it into a holistic program.
He didn't just hand out medicine. He established what we might call opium refuges or rehabilitation centers run by Chinese converts. These weren't just places for physical healing, they were communities where addicts received spiritual guidance, moral support, and practical care. It was a comprehensive approach to recovery.
And crucially, it became a self-sustaining model. If I understand correctly, the medicine itself was sold, but at a fair price, and the profits from its sale then funded the broader mission work and the upkeep of these refuges. It's a brilliant example of entrepreneurship fused with social impact.
Precisely. It generated revenue to fund the local church and its outreach, meaning the mission wasn't solely reliant on foreign donations. It empowered the local Chinese church to be financially independent and actively engaged in solving its own community's problems. This wasn't just about charity, it was about building indigenous capacity.
That's a vital point. The Western missionaries, like the Cambridge Seven, brought resources and initial impetus, but Pastor C demonstrated the absolute necessity of indigenous leadership. He wasn't just a helper, he was the visionary, the architect of a self-replicating, self-governing Chinese church that was deeply relevant to its context.
It really highlights the difference between an imposed solution and one that arises organically from the ground up. C understood that to truly make a difference, the solutions had to be culturally appropriate, economically viable, and led by the people they aim to serve. This is a lesson still relevant for development work today.
And the impact was tremendous. Thousands of people were rehabilitated from opium addiction through C's network. Think about the ripple effect. Not just individual lives saved, but families restored, communities strengthened, and a sense of hope rekindled in places where despair had reigned.
Switching gears slightly, let's bring Dixon Edward Hosty back into the picture. He was one of the Cambridge Seven, and eventually he succeeded Hudson Taylor as the general director of the China Inland Mission. He served for an incredible 33 years in that role, from 1903 to 1935.
That's a monumental tenure, especially through a period of immense change in China, including the fall of the Qing dynasty, the Boxer Rebellion, and the rise of the Republic. How did Hosty, a Cambridge man, navigate the evolving relationship between the Western mission and the growing indigenous church exemplified by leaders like Pastor C?
Hosty's leadership was characterized by a deep respect for the vision Hudson Taylor had laid out, to reach the unreached but also to build an indigenous church. He understood the importance of empowering Chinese leaders, even if it meant stepping back from direct control. He saw his role as facilitating, not dominating.
He really acted as a bridge between eras. He upheld the initial spiritual fervor and commitment of the early CIM, but he also had to adapt to the changing political landscape and the growing desire for self-determination within the Chinese church. His ability to foster genuine partnership rather than paternalism was critical.
It sounds like a delicate balance. On one hand, maintaining the mission's core identity and vision, and on the other, recognizing the imperative to nurture local leadership and autonomy. That requires incredible humility and foresight, especially for someone coming from such a privileged background.
Absolutely. And it wasn't always easy. There were inevitable tensions between different approaches. But Hosti consistently championed the idea that the Chinese church should be led by Chinese people, funded by Chinese people, and self-propagating. He truly embodied the spirit of that indigenous vision, even as a foreigner.
So, we have these two parallel but intersecting stories. The Cambridge Seven bringing that initial spark and international attention, and then the steady, pragmatic, and profoundly contextual work of someone like Pastor C, whose solutions were rooted in Chinese soil and Chinese leadership, and Hosti trying to hold it all together from the top.
What strikes me most is the concept of collision that we started with. It wasn't just a clash, but also a fertile ground for innovation and synergy. The spiritual drive from the West met the practical ingenuity and deep cultural understanding from the East. The opium crisis, as horrific as it was, became a catalyst for this indigenous strength to emerge.
And the opium antidote is such a perfect emblem of that synergy. It was a medical solution, yes, but it was also a social solution, an economic model, and a spiritual pathway to recovery. It addressed the whole person and the whole community, demonstrating that genuine transformation requires a multifaceted approach.
The legacy of this period is really profound. It shows us that true impact often comes not from imposing external ideas, but from listening, empowering, and partnering with local communities to solve their own problems in ways that make sense for them. The Cambridge Seven might have opened the door, but it was the likes of Pastor C who built the house.
It also speaks to the incredible human capacity for resilience and adaptation. Faced with a crisis like opium addiction, people didn't just despair, they innovated. They found ways to heal, to rebuild, and to create something new and positive out of immense suffering. It's truly inspiring.
And Pastor C's story in particular reminds us that the most effective leadership often comes from those who have walked through the fire themselves. His personal battle with opium gave him an authority and compassion that no outsider could ever replicate. He literally turned his personal tragedy into a lifeline for thousands.
So from the hallowed halls of Cambridge to the grassroots struggle against opium in rural China, we see a tapestry woven with sacrifice, ingenuity, and profound human connection. It's a testament to how global movements can intersect with local realities to create lasting change, often in the most unexpected ways.
It makes you rethink what privilege truly means, doesn't it? These Cambridge men used their privilege not to accumulate more, but to give it all away for a cause they believed in, and that action, in turn, helped unleash the powerful indigenous leadership that ultimately made the greatest difference.
Exactly. And Pastor C's opium antidote and the network he built. It's not just a historical curiosity. It's a blueprint for integrated, community-led solutions to complex social problems, showing how spiritual conviction can fuel practical action. It's a legacy that continues to resonate.
A truly impactful story, highlighting the power of vision, adaptation, and empowering local voices. Thank you, Nana Ya and Iman, for sharing these incredible insights today. It's a history that definitely deserves more attention.
My pleasure, man. It's a story rich with lessons for our own time.
Absolutely, thanks for having me. And thanks to everyone for tuning in to this powerful episode.